Imagine a place where the boundaries of age, industry, background, and culture melt away, replaced by a shared desire to explore the depths of our collective experiences. Here, on the open, shaded porch, amidst an atmosphere of serenity and tranquility, leaders from all walks of life gather to share their stories, the stories that shape their very beings and doings. This is the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Layla Marouf.
Welcome back to my talk with Rama Chakaki. Rama has 30 years of experience in media, telecom, edtech, fintech, and AI, and has a passion for empowering young people, especially those affected by conflict, to use technology for positive change. Rama, we wrapped up the first part of our discussion exploring the notion that success can sometimes breed complacency, causing individuals to resist change once they believe they've achieved their goals. Rather than adhering to strict management, the key lies in actively engaging and guiding individuals through adaptable approaches. So when it comes to adapting and changing, how do you deal with change as a leader?
So I'll touch a little bit on the management part, and then I'll talk about change. With management, for as long as I can remember, I've believed in servant leadership. You're there to enable those around you to do the work that they need to do. And that's served me well. There is some friction sometimes in traditional businesses like the finance world that we're in. People look more favorably on, I'm Thor and I'm going to come and tell you what to do, as opposed to, well, would you like to try this and would you like to do that? But I think over time they start appreciating the value. As far as change, once someone from the consulting world that I was working in said to me that consultants are change addicts because we go from one project to another, and that lit a bubble in me that there are people that are more comfortable with change in a changing environment than others, and so I have to be mindful when I'm working with people that have spent a lifetime in a particular industry or are on a very linear career path, that perhaps I have something that they don't, discomfort with change. Now, how did this develop? Well, where do we start? You have the journey of an immigrant, being the daughter of I lived the immigration process. That definitely gives you that shakeup, that the very dramatic change. Being female and going through the mothering process, that's a huge change that we all go through. Having a divorce early on in my life, or having a crisis, a health crisis, all of these things build your resilience for change. And then over time, it starts feeling like that's the regular mode of operation. And so in a sense, my ability to go from the VC hat to the nonprofit leader hat is part of that resilience that I built, where I can tackle an emergency on the VC side and an emergency on the nonprofit side with the same level of competency, because I'm so accustomed to change.
Wow, that's so impressive, because I think you're not realizing it, but when you say accustomed to change, I see a very adaptive human being in front of me, like you said, with your different roles as a mother, as a daughter, as a refugee, as this, as that. I mean, these are experiences that added so much knowledge to your life, so much that you don't even realize it anymore. It's so unconscious. It comes so naturally to you. But do you think this is a trait that many of our kids need going forward?
Absolutely. I mean, the world is changing so fast around us. I was talking to my, at the time, 14-year-old daughter, and redefining the rules or reinforcing the rules. We were living in Dubai at the time. And she said, it's hard to be living in a city that's growing faster than you. And I thought that was a profound statement. And that's what our kids experience on a day-to-day basis, because everything now is happening, it feels like, at a much faster pace. And so their ability to adapt it's a requirement. And the thing that concerns me most is this adapting to the climate change that's happening so rapidly. I mean, we used to see a crisis happening once every 6 months to a year somewhere around the world. And now we're seeing them within the same week. And that has an impact on us emotionally, physically, even if we're not there. It's in our thoughts. You know, where do we go next? What do we do next? How do we plan for permanence when things are so temporary? So I think it's a skill that requires a curriculum around it.
Yes.
For children and adults.
Yes, I totally believe in that. I totally think that education systems should really pay more attention to a skill set like that, more than anything else that can be obsolete in 1 year even. I can't even say 2 or 3 years anymore, because the exponential change in technology, there's a consequence for all that, right? And I see it so much in kids, like you said, in our children, in the younger leaders, where I feel their anxiety level is really much higher than what we were at their age. And this is really a concern sometimes. That stress level, the anxiety, the overwhelmness of so much that's going on around them. What do you think is a solution for that?
Being in nature and seeing how we're a part of nature, I think, is a huge healer for anxiety. And it's the antithesis of technology and social media. I think the more time you spend on Instagram and TikTok, the more subconsciously anxious you are. Because there's a lot of now comparison and news that just is firing at you at an alarming rate. But second, because it rewires your brain to shorter and shorter cycles. And so you want to find being in nature that kind of extends that wiring of your brain again and calms you and lessens your anxiety. That's just one. But a lot of other, the building the community is key. And that community can be at school, can be within the home, but can be in a place of work. But how do we redefine community and reinforce those old community values that served us well, and giving us that sense of belonging, the sense of calm, reintroducing that into the younger generation's life?
Yes, I really think that's a great point, because it's not easy, especially that we kind of shifted away a little bit with our modern world, where our focus and attention and all that. Now it's so difficult. But going back to that, how do you kind of engrave those principles in your work, in your organization? What are these values that you think is, what constructs the foundation in maybe the firm that you're partner in right now?
So we have about 20 colleagues. Many of them are in their 20s. And we get on a call in the morning, and I have to remind everyone to smile. And I have a challenge, maintain a smile for the entirety of the call, because your smile is a reflection of how you feel. And so it's kind of, initially they feel forced, but then they start thinking about, well, what's going on that I can't smile or maintain a smile? Why am I so stern? And so this is a very simple part. 2, let's all get on a Strava app that helps us compete through sports with each other. And gets us out into the world to run or walk or kayak or do something of that nature. And then pausing initially to say, how was your day? What book are you reading? Can you tell us about your son or daughter or family? We have game days where we're all, it's basic, but unfortunately, a lot of corporate environments are stripped of that, and we need to bring it back in.
And you're doing a great job. And what makes you smile?
Well, First, I'm just grateful to be alive, honestly. In my 20s, I had a health crisis that I was in and out of the cardiac intensive care unit for months, actually years, a couple of years. And I walk around with a pacemaker. So when I wake up every morning, I'm like, I got 30 years that I might have not had if it wasn't for good technology. That's one. Second, I am surrounded with wonderful people, and it is a deliberate approach. When I decided I was going to focus on impact in 2005, while it was a very hard journey back then, it resulted in having very caring, very nurturing people around me who love the same things I do. So what's there not to smile about?
Wow, that's an amazing story, Rama. It just makes me think of so many things I'm reading right now about how the dichotomy of things around us, we never pay attention to both, why they are so much, they complement each other, like life and death. Death is there for us to appreciate life. The day is there for us to appreciate the night and the rest. And I think that kind of perspective is what I had when I thought about the processes that really can evolve leaders' knowledge maturity. So when the connection is there, the disconnection is also as important. We never think of either, both. We always think either or. We're so linear in thinking, but I think it's time now to look at all these perspectives in a very different way, more like friendly factors altogether and not the enemy. It's not this or that anymore. And I think your story really brings that out in so many ways that makes a lot of sense, right? But I also like to hear more about what keeps you going in life.
So first, I want to really thank you for emphasizing that duality, that point about it's in darkness that we see the light. It's in the quiet between the words that we make meaning. This is such an important concept that often people lose. And with leaders, I find that the jump from, we made 1 million to we have to make 2 million there's never that, it's these bumps on the road that help us learn to grow. Otherwise, we're going to crash and burn. So really very important concept. And thank you for highlighting that. What keeps me going? Partly the challenges. On the nonprofit side, every time I get a new student who needs funding for their higher education, my initial response is a little bit of anxiety that, am I going to be able to make it? And then I'm thinking, all right, let's go. There's a future to be had, and it's partly appreciation of people on the outside, partly this feeling like the change. I'm used to it. I need to have that continue. I'm very curious. I do love learning about new things, and I'm so lucky to be in the VC world because you're learning every day, whether it's on the evaluation side of startups where these new, young, bright people are always telling you, here's a new way of looking at the world. And so we're learning there. Or on the investor side, we have limited partners, investors who are always challenging our perspective. How can you be different? Why invest in you and not someone else? And so there's this constant thing. And then lastly, I'm a grandmother. I'm a new grandmother.
Wow.
So this little, yeah, it's great. My granddaughter, I spent a lot of time with her in August, and it was phenomenal to revisit that stage in life and just see what it's like for my daughter to be a mother in this era, a working mother, and what kids, that they bring you that kind of vitality and just beautiful. And it's nice from my perspective to see how I'm changing to adapt to that role as well.
And what are the challenges you think your daughter is facing nowadays that you didn't face?
For one, our generation used to be challenged by the fact that there are a lot of people who want to tell you what to do when you're a young mother. Multiply that by millions now, because now being on TikTok as a mother, every second you're getting a new perspective on what it's like to do the right thing. And those perspectives are not localized to Syria or, Saudi or Kuwait. Those perspectives are global. And so filtering through that, just the thought of that gives me anxiety, and thinking about how she has to manage that alongside the near and close opinions, but also thinking about some of the challenges they have to go through of, do I put my daughter's photo on Instagram or not? Is it going to be used in AI for good? I'm so grateful we didn't have that. And as kids or as mothers of young kids, technology wasn't there for our children. And so they were roaming around outside. We had to be out with them. And now it's this constant struggle of, how do I keep my child away from technology at an early age? I'm happy to be helping her out. It's a much harder world.
It is, really it is. I mean, you were talking about curiosity, and I found that to be the zest in our life, just, learning constantly. And I think going through this phase in your life now, it's challenging, but yet it's exciting. Just to look at, what has changed, what brings you happiness right now, just looking at a kid, but at the same time, having that anxious thoughts about their future, what they're heading into and all that. And how can you help in your own perspective, but not imposing that, as you said? And how can they filter all these different opinions and ideas? In what way? And how can it prove right, unless they kind of experiment with some of them? So yes, there's a lot going on, I think, in today's world. It's not easy, but I think, again, it's how you look at it, right? How do you look at all this? As exciting, or is it fearful? And I don't know, I don't think you are, but that fear that kind of paralyzes our movement.
No.
No.
Yeah, for sure. Not fearful, but rather, where are the solutions to these challenges? One of my dear mentors was a professor in college, Shelley Heller, who I always looked up to, because she was always on the forefront of, how do we create technology that serves humans well? And when I mentioned to her that I've just become a grandmother and my daughter lives in Dubai, and she said, "Oh, here's a trick that I learned. Buy the same book for yourself and for your daughter, and this way, when you're Zooming with your granddaughter, you can both read together." And I thought, isn't this delightful? I mean, in the past, you were separated, and it was only a phone call, and so the grandmothers didn't know or didn't get to see how their grandchildren look like, and now they have a play-by-play remotely. They can tell what they're going through. So definitely embracing the new novelties, but also mindful of, okay, well, how else can we help make it easy for the younger generation?
Yes, definitely. I mean, look at this now. We're like, 12 hours apart in two different continents in the world. But again, yes, what are the pros and cons of all that? Definitely. So what keeps you up at night, Rama, these days?
Number one, the exclusivity of technology. And so investing in AI, I'm always looking for founders who are finding ways to make AI inclusive. How can a young person in a refugee camp in Jordan benefit from it? How can an elderly person in Omaha, Nebraska benefit from it? And how can we develop an AI that serves everybody? And right now, we're not on that path. Right now, it's serving the loudest and the most financially rewarding population. And we do need to be mindful not to exclude seniors from AI, not to exclude refugees or other sort of communities who are already marginalized by technology. I think that's the biggest challenge for me.
And how far are we from achieving that, do you think? Many years, couple of years?
With the right type of leaders who are some of the leaders or the leadership, abide by the leadership principles that you mentioned in your book, we would be closer at getting there. But you need a much wider spread of this mindful, holistic approach to management. because right now it's still the majority is looking after the exponential returns and not necessarily the exponential impact. And so, people will tell you, there's the insular factor of investment communities. They're not necessarily so out there with the senior communities and others. And B, it's the nature of who makes up the people in AI. So we're still a little far, but we need to rally more people through these type of conversations to come into AI and partner with the developers of AI to make this a reality.
We need more public awareness, right? A big one. I don't know, but we definitely do. So again, what does success mean to Rama?
First of all, seeing more women investing. Because I think that it starts there. We think different than men, and we care a lot about community, and we care about families, and we care about nurture, and that has to come into the investment world. We also have literally a different visual perspective, and so the way we see organizations behave, the way we see businesses develop is a different perspective. So that's number one success, is changing that. Less than 2% of investors are female, and less than 12% of businesses invested in are women led investments in the tech.
Why is that? Why, Rama? Why?
We're not at the table. The more people like you and me are making decisions in predominantly male deal rooms, the more we're likely to move the needle and remind our male counterparts of what's important and why it is important to dig deeper. That's a whole other kind of realm. But women present different than men when they're pitching. And so that ends up creating a bias, because men are looking for the confidence and the rah-rah, and women are silently confident. They don't necessarily boast. So that, there are a lot of factors there. I think having a lot more women in leadership positions in the business world without compromising their roles as mothers and nurturers is important. And that takes a transformation of the industry as well. Because this industry, it's an either or. You can't be both.
But that's the thing. I always think of that and think again in the same way that women bring one part of the story where men bring the other part of the story, and both are needed here. You said the nurturing part that women bring and the masculine part that the men bring. And I think we need both in different times at different ways. And that's the thing. I know we say we need more women, and I always think, okay, why? I just love to ask the why question all the time, because that kind of pinpoints the real problem. Sometimes we kind of think of, the surface kind of reasons. But if we really dig deep, why, it brings me personally to the education system again. From the beginning, the way we were educated, maybe even with a standardized test, so that we're put in certain ways to bring, let's say, certain populations to certain universities, and then bring them to the workplace and so on. And we see more and more of that happening, right? So sometimes it's about those lines that human has put there, right? So many of those fragmentations that I think, like you said, even this disconnection and going back to nature, I think a big part of that is not only to de-stress, I think even to look and to think and to reflect of what's going on in nature and how all these different diversified animals, plants, how do they live together to, bring this holistic system to life? And how do we sustain that in so many ways? So I don't know, a lot of that kind of thinking comes to my mind when you talk about women versus men, and it's a man's world, but that's reality. And just to bring women, I think it starts with schools, education, awareness, knowledge, maturity, and so on. And I think we need more of that. I loved your Baraka bits, right? This is the first digital content platform focused on good news. What a change, Rama. Good news.
Yeah.
I love that. Really, I love that. Because I don't know why human beings are so attracted to bad news all the time, disasters and all that. So where did this come from? The good news part. Let me hear more about that.
Thank you for mentioning that. I mean, I living in the Middle East and working at the time with a lot of nonprofits and social impact founders, I realized that we're operating in this world of optimism, and then the news was operating in a world of pessimism. And when you study psychology, if I'm a young man and I'm portrayed in the news as a terrorist here and terrorist there, that really affects my psychology. Whereas if I start seeing role models or people like me in the community doing good, then that inspires me. So that was the crux of the why we created Baraka Bits, because there were all these amazing things that news outlets in the Middle East were not covering. And I thought, what a terrible thing for the psychology of our young people. And when we started it, I mean, within a very modest amount of time, we were getting 1 million views a month, which was a testament to people were craving it in the Middle East. They wanted to know what was going on that they can tap into, feel inspired by, join, fund, and you name it.
I do think they're only attracted to good news in the Middle East, or they need that kind of news. You don't think that's global?
It is absolutely. It's absolutely global. And now I follow a lot of channels on Instagram that only talk about the positive things that are happening in the environment and the initiatives, because it's important. But absolutely, it should be. I feel like news agencies need to get a mandate that says 50-50. Put out 50% distressing news, but then put out 50% positive news.
But the thing is that it's what sells, right? It's what sells in many ways. That's how they think about it, no?
They do, but I also wonder if those statistics are really accurate, or it's a snowball, self-fulfilling kind of, assumptions thing. Just like there are wrong assumptions in the business world and had been and have been broken. And I think to go back to that women-men perspective and the fact that we need to learn from nature, there are a lot of assumptions that need to be broken or challenged, and maybe some broken, some maintained. But that certainly goes back to your talk about education. It's ask the whys, not just come and deliver completed sentences.
Yes, definitely. And the problem, I think also that the world now is such a complex place with complex issues, and we're dealing with it with not the same complexity of knowledge, the breadth and depth of, what we need really in our leaders. And that's, I think, the tricky part. So how do you describe your leadership style?
Well, I mentioned service leadership, but I really love to be challenged in a constructive way, especially by the team. I may be harder to be challenged by my partner, and he'll tell you that I'm a really difficult person when it comes to, because we're trying to fuse our visions together. But by the team, because they have a very fresh and young perspective that I don't, and so that's important. And I'm always thinking about, how do I operate out of the box with the team while maintaining structure and maintaining some coherence, because I feel that sometimes it's so disruptive for me to take someone who's so used to structure and throw them into my world of everything goes and let's see and let's experiment. Yeah. So those are some of the key pillars. And I think one thing that I always love to do is fuse disciplines. I love it when people present in a creative way and show photos and do videos and give me examples that are tangible in real life, as opposed to just following a very traditional and particular way.
Wow, yes, that makes a lot of sense. You need to grasp, digest what they're giving you in a faster way to be efficient, definitely. But what I see is you're an open-minded leader who has boundaries that are flexible. They can stretch beyond, but also you hold your employees accountable in many ways, which I like this combination. It makes sense, a lot of sense. So where do you see yourself in 5 years, Rama?
Hopefully, doing more what I'm doing today and enjoying it just as much. I feel we have a responsibility being human to correct some of the harm that's been done, and to be kinder to each other and to the planet that we inhabit. And kindness is, can be demonstrated in work, can be demonstrated in social life. So if I can build a kinder, gentler organization or organizations that I'm empowering, I feel that would have been a well-served mission.
Yes, I really think so. Last advice you leave the knowledge porch with for younger leaders, what would that be?
I think guard your time as a young leader and be thoughtful about the values that you have and how you connect them with the work that you do. Oftentimes people say, these are my values, and then I'll do this work. And there isn't a very strong match. So really, self-reflection, I think, is the most important part of the journey, and having those clear targets that match up with your values.
I think that would leave one word there. Maybe read Knowledge Mindfulness book, because it talks about all that. It talks about how do you kind of lessen the distance between your mind, heart, soul, how you make them aligned, harmonized with your impact out there and with your relationships out there. How do you put all that together to kind of live a life that's worth living at the end, right?
I love that. And I honestly wish I had that book when I was doing my master's, because I think it would have saved me a lot of headache and personal, like learning trial by error. But really, thank you for pulling that piece of work together, because it's a great launch pad for how to start your career, but it's also how do I pivot? How do I start making a difference if I'm not already thinking about it? And for me, it's all, when I was reading some of it, it felt like validation, which was great, but with tools that are much easier to manage than somewhat chaotic way that I tend to do things.
And thank you so much, because I feel you're such an example for a knowledge mindful leader out there, a woman, a model for a lot of the generations to come, hopefully, Rama. And thank you so much for being with us here today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And that brings us to the end of this week's Knowledge Mindfulness Porch. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. If you have the time, we would really appreciate if you left us a review so other amazing individuals like you can find us. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.
You have been listening to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Layla Maroof. If you want to join the movement of knowledge mindfulness and shape the world of tomorrow, go to drlaylamaroof.com. The Knowledge Mindfulness Porch is a production of Forbes Books.